We are meaning machines. That also means you are a meaning machine. Today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of meaning, what it is that humans do, what's all this human being stuff about, why it is that meaning is so important, and why it is that we are meaning machines. Let's take a deep dive and find out. Our story today starts way back in 1916 with a book published posthumously. The book, A Course in General Linguistics, was written by a Swiss linguist, Ferdinand de Saussure, and in it he would outline a new paradigm of linguistics based upon structural correspondences between objects within language. Saussure had struggled throughout his entire life to create a new, rigorous way of understanding language, but little would he realize that only after his death would his work be appreciated, and indeed it would help kick off the structuralism movement within European philosophy. Structuralism would spawn a variety of philosophical perspectives, one of which is very useful from the point of view of understanding the human mind and the challenges which face it. In the 1950s and 60s, Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, reinterpreted the works of Saussure, and he put forward his reinterpretation of language from a psychoanalytical perspective. Psychoanalysis being the clinical practice of listening to the patient speak about their various life issues until little by little they would find a resolution to them via therapy. Saussure had put forward some interesting ideas about language, and in particular, he pointed out that the sign was the most important and basic unit of language, and that the sign consisted of the signifier and the signified, with the signifier being the words themselves and the signified being the meanings which were located within them. For Saussure, these two elements of signifier and signified were equally important. However, Lacan would turn them on their head by creating the Saussurean algorithm, indicating that its meaning that we allocate to words is much more important than the words themselves. Now I know what you might be thinking, what's all this about? Signifier, some kind of linguistic gobbledygook. But just bear with me for a minute, because the meanings of words have a huge power upon us. The meaning of the words that we listen to create our world, the world that we're living in, and the way we think about ourselves. So let's think in terms of a nice analogy for the signified and the signifiers. So let's think in terms of a railway carriage and its occupants. The railway carriage is a signifier, the word, while the inhabitants of the railway carriage, the people, are the signified. Now a railway carriage may carry as many as 70 people, for example, and by the same token a word signifier may carry a great many meanings inside. That's the signified. To put this in perspective, two people can say the same word, and yet it will evoke different meanings to them. For example, two people may say the word boat, and for one person, it evokes the meanings of a ship, a small dinghy, and maybe a fun time they had some years ago on a riverboat. Whereas for another person, the word boat might evoke the meanings of ships, sea travel, and the memory of a cruise ship which they had spent a week-long cruise on only last year. Both people have uttered the same word boat. The signifier is the same, but the meaning, the signified, is completely different. Now this is where things get interesting. You see, in psychoanalysis, the emphasis is upon language, the words that we use in everyday life possessing inner depths and meanings which we're not aware of. The principle behind psychoanalysis, the talk and cure, is for the analysand, the patient, to simply talk about whatever pops into their mind as they recline on a couch and the psychoanalyst sits behind them. Often the things which they say are inane, but over time, as the defenses of the analysand reduce, they begin to relax around the psychoanalyst and they become less protected with their speech. And little by little they make slips in their dialogue, which provides unique insights for both the analyst and the analysand. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, realized that we have two minds, a conscious everyday mind and an unconscious mind which lies in the background, and that the unconscious mind will reveal itself via slips in our everyday speech, the most famous one being the Freudian slip. In the Freudian slip, a person might have romantic feelings towards a girl called Hannah, for example. And when they go to say that they're feeling very happy, instead of saying the word happy, the word Hannah slips out, and they say I'm feeling very Hannah. Because deep inside, they have a strong affection towards her, and they need to get this out. They need to express it on some level. The reason why this happens is that the unconscious mind needs to get its truth out there. Whatever desires we have, even the unconscious ones have to find some way to release themselves into our everyday consciousness. Freud suggests that this is a necessity from the point of view of energetic balance within the psyche. If it is not spoken out, it will end up being acted out. Indeed, the reason why our lives tend not to go the way we want them to is because of friction between our conscious desires and our unconscious desires. Psychoanalysts have been working with these principles for a long time, but Lacan raised the bar by pointing out the structural qualities of language and the relation to the mechanisms of the unconscious mind. The next part of the jigsaw puzzle of how our mind operates from a structural perspective is the linguistic elements of metaphor and metonymy. Metonymy is the repeating over and over again of something boring, something monotonous, whereas metaphor is the layered, deeper meanings, one stacked upon another. Now, from a Lacanian perspective, words can either be metonymic or metaphorical. When we find new, deeper meanings, we enter into a metaphorical state and our conscious awareness expands and deepens. Going back now to the analogy of the train, we can see that when a person is having a metaphorical experience, each word in their conscious discourse is becoming increasingly metaphoric, which means that for the train analogy, there are more and more occupants in the train. When we are bored with life, each word has fewer meanings, and we become sort of stagnant, as our creative energies and passions have no way of surfacing. However, when we become more metaphorical, new meanings pop into our minds, and with them a variety of associative thoughts and feelings come in their wake, and so our creative energies and passions begin to find a release. Now, what we have to understand here is that the conscious discourse, for Lacan believed that we live in language. Without language, there would be no ego, and sure, we don't want to be big-headed, but the conscious self is by its very nature an ego, and it is necessary to have an ego, not a big ego, but a balanced ego, to appreciate and participate in life. We are always swimming in language. When we are speaking to others or when we are simply having internal dialogue, we are living in language. Indeed, even if we become quiet within, we still think conceptually, and these concepts are linguistic, so even in deep meditative states, we're still immersed in the symbolic world of language. When we're speaking about language here, we don't mean English or Japanese or German or whatever, rather we mean the linguistic constraints of the world as interpreted by any language. For individual words may differ, but deep down each language is based upon the same principles, and these deep linguistic constructs fabricate a perception of the world in which we are living in. Our world is a linguistical construct, and we are a product of the web of words that populate our minds and a perception of the world which we find ourselves in. So we cannot get away from language, and language either will make us happy or sad, not because the words, signifiers, mean anything on their own, but rather because their deep inner meanings, signifiers, determine the quality of our everyday consciousness. Another principle which we have to understand here is that the human being is compromised by the need to fit in with society. In his seminal work, Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud contends that the major problem which human beings face is that to live in a civilized society we have to repress our true desires. The price for civilization is repression. In psychoanalysis, repression is the process whereby the unconscious mind represses some thought which runs counter to the dictates of our conscious paradigm. Early in life, our unconscious mind creates a subpersonality which is commonly known as the inner critic. Freud would name the structure the superego, and the purpose of the superego is to keep the human being within the bounds of society. What we have to remember here is that in society, the survival instincts get in the way of the smooth running of society. From a biological perspective, we are set up for fight or flight. We either find the enemy and fight them, or we run away from the enemy. When we disagree with someone, we hit them, and when we desire someone, we simply grab them. This might have worked okay back in the caveman days, but once society started to become organized around a tribal culture, where groups of humans banded together, sudden acts of violence and sexual urges had to be curtailed for the overall well-being of society in general. Once this occurred, the first laws were passed in the form of taboo, and society started to impose these arbitrary rules and regulations upon its citizens. The result of this is an organized and efficient civilized society, but just below the waterline of society lies our unconscious aggressive and sexual thoughts, which we're always seeking an escape from. Also, there is a heavy price to be paid for repression, for repression puts a stop not only to unwarranted violent and sexual urges, but also it stifles the passion of the individual And this is a big problem. Why are antidepressants so unpopular? People don't like using antidepressants and anxiolytic drugs in general because they numb this conscious awareness and make the person's perception of life more dull and boring, metonymical. Now, the reason for this is that antidepressants repress the emotions, but they cannot discern between negative thoughts and feelings and genuine, joyful thoughts and feelings. Rather, everything gets tossed down the garbage chute. The reason why antidepressants do this is just like the repressive mechanisms within the unconscious mind. They hold back and hold down all passionate thoughts and feelings, the bad ones, and yes, the good ones also. The reason why so many people are unhappy is that their life lacks meaning. Yes, we are meaning machines. Our purpose in life is to find meaning. And why do we have to find meaning in life? We need to find meaning in life because the nature of the human mind is to take raw experiences and refine them within the mill of our conscious mind until greater levels of meaning are generated. And with that, higher levels of conscious awareness come along. We human beings are creative and expressive sentient beings whose primary function is to disseminate experiences and create new ever subtle levels of conscious awareness in the process. So yes, we are meaning machines, biological sentient meaning machines. You are a meaning machine. And if you want to live your best life ever, you have to delve ever deeper into your experiences. You have to probe them and work your way through the dross of metonymical experiences, the boring, the repetitive dross of everyday life, and you must find metaphorical meaning instead. Why is it that we find a movie a meaningful experience? So much so that when we come out of the cinema hall, somehow we feel strangely moved by the experience. Why is it that a really good book opens the doors of our imagination to a completely different and far more interesting world, a world which renews us and makes us feel bigger and better deep inside? Why is it that we reminisce over some early life events, and when we do so, it appears that we've connected with a stream of memories and feelings which make us feel both nostalgic and somehow more expressive and human at the same time? All of these are examples of metaphorical living, whereby we take raw experience and squeeze out the juice of deeper conscious experience from it. You cannot go back and relive yesterday's glories. You cannot go back in time and eat yesterday's lunch, regardless of how tasty it was. You cannot go back to your favorite relationship or your favorite time in your present romantic relationship and relive it all over again. Yes, we are all tempted to pine for a better earlier time in our lives, when somehow things seem better now in the 2020 vision of hindsight. Little realizing that the reason why our past seems so enticing is that our mind has now processed these early experiences and is now deriving some metaphorical benefit from them. And that today's dull experiences will also get a sort of extra sheen when our mind processes them in the due course. So, you want to live your best life ever? Do you want to live it large? You want to be a bigger, better, and more expansive version of yourself? Well, the way to live your best life ever is to realize that you are a meaning machine, a biological sentient meaning machine, and your purpose here in life is to find meaning. The finding of meaning is itself the meaning of life. How do you go about this? Well, begin with realizing that every experience, good, bad, or boring, is in itself an opportunity. For the greatness of human beings lies in their beingness. What this means is that our conscious awareness is like a layer of perceptual self-awareness. We are aware at the same time of having an experience and also reflecting upon an experience. So we can both experience reality and think about what is this like for us. We can reflect upon our awareness of things. And this puts us in a very special place in the world in which we live. Begin by making yourself more consciously aware of every situation. Realize that your consciousness is unique amongst all the species on this planet, and that if you stop judging the experiences and instead simply observe them and probe into them and seek to find inner nuggets of experiences which perhaps you have previously ignored or repressed, bit by bit you can integrate these experiences more and more and find new levels of meaning in all of your experiences. Secondly, learn more about yourself. Do some work on yourself. Read some self-help books, watch some educational videos, learn about the psychology of the human personality, and more importantly, learn about yourself. Learn about who you are, what you think and feel about what matters to you, and start opening up to aspects of life that have previously been closed to you. Find your inner passions and start to live a more passionate life, a life that is attuned to your inner values and drives. Express yourself, find yourself and be yourself, and whatever you do, start to live as a consciously active meaning machine. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.